Okay, so we are going to be doing chapter 3 today, the Access Workbench that starts on page 202 in edition 8 of the book. If you are using edition 9 for some reason, that's on page 204. So taking a look at that, it's explaining to us that we're going to be working with Microsoft Access SQL, and we're going to learn how to use some of the statements that are in there using the WMCRM database that we've been using. Now, if you remember from the lecture that we had, some of these queries or some of these SQL statements that we're going to be inputting do not always work well with Access. So sometimes you'll have to use the GUI screen, sometimes you'll have to use the Access screen, but it will work out in the end, I promise. So the GUI screen is actually called the QBE screen, which is the Query by Example screen. So you'll see that as you go through the lesson. But the first thing that it wants us to do is to go into our query screen to start out with. So we're going to go to Create and go to Query Design. And this is what the GUI screen looks like, also called the QBE. But we're not going to use that to start out with. We're going to start out with going up here to the left-hand corner and using our SQL screen. And you see it automatically defaults to Select, so that's great. But in this case, it's asking us on page 203 to input select with the star, which remember from our lecture means to select everything within the parameters we're inputting. And our parameter is to select everything from the customer table. And then we have to make sure that we have our semicolon at the end so that it tells it that this is the end of the statement and all the query that we're going to run. So once we've done that, we can click the Run button. And here it brings up all of the information that's in the customer table. Very simple, easy to do. And then it's going to ask us to save that. Okay, and once we've saved that, you can see it over here to the left-hand side. It's now under our query menu. Okay. All right, so we can actually close that one out because we're all finished with that. But now going on to page 208, it looks like they would like to show us how to do that within the GUI system, so our QBE system. So we're going to go ahead, or I should say QBE window rather, create and then query design. And we get the table that comes up and they're asking us to select the customer table. So we're going to say add. And you can see once you do that and close out that window, you have all of the fields that we have built into that table. And they actually give us the little star up at the top. So we can just drag that all the way down to the bottom. And it says give us all the data from customer in the customer table. So all the customer data. All right, once again, all we have to do once we've completed that is to go up here and select Run. And we get the same data that we did previously. All right, so we're going to go ahead and it asks us to save this one as well, but this time we're going to call it QBE. Okay, once you've done that, you can click to close that out. So that's very simple, like I said, the first few pages of this exercise. Okay, so then going on to page 210, we're going to run a different type of query. We're still going to use our QBE window, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to ask it for some specific information instead of asking for everything. So if we go back to our database and we go to Create, Query Design, we're still using our customer table, but in this case, it's asking us to pull some specific fields. So it looks like it's asking for customer ID. So you're just going to grab that and drag it down. Customer ID, that's great. But it only wants us, according to the book, to look for customers that have a customer ID that is greater than 2. So we're going to put in that criteria here. And then it says bring in last name and sort that last name by descending order. And then bring in the first name. So those are the only fields that it's requesting. So we've gone ahead and set that up properly. And now we're going to click Run and see what it does. It brings up our customer ID in descending order and the last name and first name for each one of those corresponding customer IDs. So again, very simple, very easy to do. Now, if we wanted to take a look at this to see what the SQL view is of the design, you can go over here to the left-hand corner and see View, and look at that. Comes up with all the SQL coding to say select customer from customer ID with the last name, first name from the customer table where customer ID is greater than 2, and please order those customers by last name in descending order. So just exactly the same thing that we did, but now it is in SQL coding instead. All right, so that's what it looks like. So we're going to save this as well. And we'll go ahead and save that. And once again, we can close it out. The third step, they're looking for some additional information. So they're actually going to have us use 2 tables to pull information from the database. So we're going to go back to create with our query design, and they want us to use both customer and contact. So you can see from the previous chapter, we created a relationship between these 2 tables. So you can see that's still listed there. And from here, they want us to take customer ID, but this time they don't want us to show it in the field, in the results window. So we're going to uncheck this box so it says do not show that. And this time they want us to only show customers with the ID of number 3. Okay, so we put that in as the specific criteria. Then they also want last name again and first name again, but this time they're not asking us to put them in any particular order by last name. There's going to be some criteria from contact, though, they're going to ask us to do. So then they're asking us to do it by contact date. So we're going to grab that from this table. And from contact date, they're asking us to put it in ascending order. So this is how we're going to sort this, this query. And then we have contact type and any remarks. Okay, so that's all the information that it should return back with once we pull this query or run this query. So I'm going to go ahead and hit run. And here we go. Jessica Chrisman is our customer with the ID number 3. And these are the dates that she called in, how she called in or was contacted, and then any remarks. And remember, we can always extend this field so we can see everything that's in there. Okay, so it asks us to go ahead and save this query. So I've gone ahead and put that in and say save. And you can see again, it's over here. And then as we keep going on page 213, it's now saying to us that instead of reinventing the wheel, we're going to use this same query again, but we're going to make some modifications to it. But how we're going to do that is we don't want to actually remove this query or change it. We want to copy it and paste it. So I just right-clicked and said copy, and then paste it in here so that all the same settings are still valid. They're still going to be in there, but we're going to make just some slight modifications to it. So we're going to change this now to have a query name of 0304. So it matches the others. And we're going to go ahead into the query. So I closed out the ones we were working on, and now I'm going to go into the design view and I'm going to make some changes. You'll see that it reordered some of this information here. So because we're not showing this particular field in the query results, it put it at the end for you. But this is actually the field that they're asking us to change. And what they're saying is that instead of showing criteria for that one particular client or one particular customer, we want to be able to enter in that information each time we run this query. So you're going to start with an open bracket and you're going to say enter customer ID number and close the bracket. So once I've done that and I run the query, look what happens. Now it gives me a specific parameter value that I need to enter. So if now I'm looking for data on customer number 4, I can hit enter and it brings up all of the client ID number 4's information. Okay, so Rob Chrisman with all his contact dates, types, and or any remarks that were recorded. Okay, so this is already a saved query, so I'm just going to save it just so that we don't lose any data, and then close it out. So very simple. It's very easy to create those queries, especially when you're using the QBE system, because you're just dragging and dropping and then giving it criteria to search by. But now it's asking us to create a new table, because we now have salespersons that we would like to keep track of. So if we take a look at, looks like page 215 in your book, so it'd be 217 in mine, it says that that new salesperson table is going to have a primary key of nickname, and it's going to have the values last name, first name, hire date, wage rate, commission rate, office phone, and email address. And then there's going to be some referential constraints that are added in there. But all the other tables exist already, so we don't have to worry about that. And it says that here are all the settings for that, for the table that we're going to set up. And then eventually it's going to have data for that table that's listed down here. So, but they're asking us to do this in SQL. Now, if we were going to do this in MySQL or PHP, we would be using this data set to enter. Okay, we would be using this SQL statement rather to enter. That's because we can actually format the fields a little bit easier in SQL by entering in the information directly. So we can say, please format it with characters 35, 25, so on and so forth, and make sure that they're required. But here you could see under wage rate, it allows a numeric value that gives you 5 characters, so it restricts it to only 5 characters long. And this 2 here means that the number of values after the decimal point. So we could say the total, which they call M, this is called an MN statement. So the total value or total spaces that are allowed are 5 with 2 values after the decimal point. And should nothing be entered into that field, there's a default value of $12.50. So you're going to also see for the commission rate, we also have that numeric MN value that's in there. But unfortunately, in the Access SQL, it does not recognize that. So we're going to go ahead and put in this statement, this SQL statement, to add in the coding and create that new table. But we're going to have to go back and add in some of the additional formatting that needs to be done under these items, okay? And we'll also have to add in some additional items for the primary key for nickname, but we'll get into that in just a moment. So I did some pre-work here to prepare for this. I went ahead and created all of that table coding for SQL. So I'm just going to copy that there, and once again go to create and go to query design. And I'm going to say close here and then go to the SQL window. And then I'm just going to go ahead and paste in all of the information. So again, everything's in there that I just copied and that's in the book. And you have your semicolon at the end to indicate that that's all the programming that we're going to be doing. Once I have that, I can click run. And you see what just happened is over here, a new table was just created. Okay, so I can actually go take a look at that, look at the design view, and here's all the information that I had input so far. So I'm going to go ahead and save this query. This is going to be a little bit different than the ones that we did. So this is the name of the query that we just created. So I'm going to say OK. And you can see it has a little bit of a different icon because it's an actual creation statement. So just a little tool over there to let you know that that's what that is. It's a little bit different than actually pulling data. You're actually creating a table. So now that I've done that, I can close this window out. But now we have to go in and change those formattings that we weren't able to do in that window. The wage rate was the first one. So we're going to go down here and say we're going to format that as a currency. And we're going to say the default value is $12.50. And you'll see when I do that, it will take that ending 0 out because it's an empty value, so it's not really necessary to put that in there, so that's okay. And then under decimal places, we're going to say 2. Okay, So there we go. So that's all formatted correctly. And then we're going to go under commission rate. And we're just going to go under format. Sorry, pick the wrong one. Format is going to be percent. And the decimal places are going to be 3. Okay, now that we've finished the commission rate changes, we're going to go to email address, and we are going to make a change to the indexed portion because it said that that needed to be unique. So we're going to say yes and no duplicates. Okay, and then we're going to click save. All right, so we've made the changes there. Again, very, very simple to do, but now we need to make a few other changes as well. So we need to add in a constraint on the contact table that says that we want to only allow the contact type to be phone, fax, email, or meeting. So let's go to the contact table and let's take a look at that. So right now under contact type, we do have it written in there that says allowed values are phone, fax, email, and meeting. However, we don't have it required. So if you look down here, it's not, there's no validation rule that says we specifically have to have those in there. So if we go to page, looks like in your book, it's page 222, the center of the page. On mine, it's 224. So it gives us the SQL coding that we would put in, or the SQL statement that we would put in to actually put in that constraint, so that those are the only types of entries that we would accept being entered into the database. But unfortunately, again, because this is using Access, it doesn't accept some of these. It's just too much information. If we try to put this in there, it's going to kick it out and tell us that there's a syntax error. So we don't want to do that. We're going to actually do it directly in the contact table, the design view. So we're going to go ahead back to Access, and we're going to come down here to validation rule. We're going to say that the validation rule is phone or fax or email or meeting. Those are the only options or entries that the system will accept going forward. So we're going to go ahead and say save. And look what happens. We get this message that comes up that says data integrity rules have been changed. Existing data may not be valid for the new rules. What that essentially means is that we could have entered in other values previously that didn't match that, and so there may be a problem with that. So you may get an error message once it goes through and validates all of this to let you know, oh wait, this record doesn't have that correct. So it wants to know, do we want to go back and validate all of that? So yes we do, so we're going to say yes. And then once again, we're going to save that, close it out, and move on to the next item that we need to enter. And the next thing that it's asking us to do on page 224 is we need to enter in salespeople to go into our new salesperson table. And they're asking us to do that in SQL. So we can go ahead and do that by going to create once again and go into our query, hit close, and then go to our SQL table. Now again, I've done some pre-work ahead of time to make this a little bit easier. We're going to say insert into salesperson these particular values. Now remember, during the lecture, you have to make sure that you're entering this in correctly in the order that you need it to be entered, because if you mismatch anything or transpose one of these items, it's not going to know that that's the incorrect field or the incorrect data item. So you need to make sure that you have this correct when you're doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in there. So we've got Tina with those values. Now remember, you can indent if you want to. I'm not going to, just for time's sake for these, but the indentation does actually make it a little more streamlined and easier to figure out where you need to make your corrections or where you can find information. But once I've gone ahead and done that and click run, it says, okay, you're about to append one row. Are you sure you want to do that? Yes, I do. I'm going to do the same thing for the other two gentlemen. But now if we go to the salesperson table, there we go. We've got the nickname listed in there, last name, first name, hire date, and so on and so forth. And you see if we needed to add another person, that default value that we gave it earlier, $12.50, automatically populates, but we can certainly change that if we needed to. It's just the default. Okay, so now that we've done that, we do have to establish nickname as the foreign key to the customer table. And the reason for that is because obviously as people are working, or salespeople are working with customers, we want to identify who the person is that they're working with. So we're going to have to make those changes as well. So if you look on page 224, or 226 in my book, it says after we've gone ahead and added in the salespeople, continuing on, here are the columns that we're going to be entering for the customer table nickname column, the characteristics that we would use to enter that information in there. Okay, now once again, they're asking us to do that in SQL. So now we're on page 228. It's asking us to alter the table customer to add in nickname as a field. And then later on, we're going to set up a constraint, but we're not going to do that quite this moment. But we're going to go ahead and alter that table. Again, I've gone ahead and done some pre-work, so we're going to go into SQL. And we're going to say, alter the table to add in that particular field. So I'm going to copy that from my little pre-work statement over there. And then we're going to say run. Now, you see it didn't give us a little pop-up window or anything to tell us that it was completed, but it did come over here and highlight the data definition, which means we can go in and make some changes if we needed to how that data is defined. But obviously we don't need to at this stage, and it's something we haven't covered yet. But trust me, that field now is in there. If we go to the customer table and go to design view, now you can see nickname is there. Okay, so that's great. So now what we want to do is we're also going to make some changes to who is assigned to which salesperson. So we're going to update that information in the customer table as well. So that's what this says here. We need to update customer and set where Big Bill is to customer 1, customer 2. So I'm going to just do 1 and then I'll do the rest. Okay, so I just grabbed one of them and said, okay, we're going to use this one. Update customer, set nickname Tina, where customer ID equals 5. So I'm going to run the query. It says you're about to update the information. You can't undo that. Is that okay? Yes. So I went ahead and did that. So it went ahead and updated the customer table with that information for that particular customer ID. So I've actually gone through and done that for all of them now. So I'm just going to close this one out. I just wanted to show you how to do that with this particular example. We don't need to save this query, so that's fine. But if I go now and open this table, you can see I have the nicknames here. So Big Bill, Billy, Tina, and Tina, which corresponds with the updates that we needed to do up until this point. Now the last thing that is asking us to do is to alter the table customer and alter the column nickname with characters 35 to not null. In other words, it's just asking us to make this a required field. Okay, so we're going to go back here to query design. And we're going to go to SQL. And like I said, I did this as some pre-work. So I'm going to grab this here and paste that. Okay. So again, I'm not going to indent or anything at this point, and just click run. Again, it didn't show us anything here. I just changed this field to be highlighted, or this option to be highlighted. So again, we don't need this query anymore. So I'm going to say no. And that was under the customer table. So if we go to design view and we go to nickname, it now says that it's a required field. Okay, again, you could do it in this GUI window. We're just trying to show you how you could do it if you needed to otherwise, or if you prefer to actually use some of those SQL statements. All right, so it looks like that's all set on page 227. But now it's asking us to do some constraints. So on page 228, in your book and page 230 in mine. So we're adding the constraint that says that we need to alter the table customer so that the foreign key is now nickname. And essentially it says that anytime that information is updated, it should update on both those tables. Okay, so unfortunately though, again, we're using access to do this, so it will not understand update on cascade, which is what that means to completely update the tables as you go through and make those changes. So we're going to do this one first, but then we're going to have to go into the relationship and make those changes. So again, I have that already typed up on here, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to our system. I'm going to close out that customer table because we don't need it. Go to Create, Query Design, close that out, and go to SQL. And I'm going to go ahead and paste. And there is our statement here, a SQL statement to make that alteration, to add in that constraint. And I'm going to go ahead and say Run. Again, didn't tell me it was done, but I know it's there. We're going to go ahead and close that out. We don't need to save it. But now if we go to our relationships, we've actually established one, right? So we're going to go to Database Tools and go to Relationships. And once we show the salesperson table, you'll see it automatically has a relationship that was established by putting in that constraint. It's a one-to-many. All right, see that information there? So now what it's saying though is that we need to make a modification to this, this constraint, to this relationship rather. The constraint's already done, but we need to tell it that anytime there's an update to salesperson, it needs to update everywhere, that primary key or foreign key exists in this relationship. So we're going to go ahead and right click here and say Edit Relationship. And we're going to click on Cascade Update Related Fields. It already has our enforced referential integrity there. We don't have to worry about that. We're going to say OK. So that's completed. Okay, so that is everything pretty much in this lesson. If there's any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thanks so much.